31 VI.
30 minutes past 8 o'clock for Wednesday, the 27th of August. It's great to be in your company this morning. William Terite in the chair with you through until 9 a.m. Now let's turn our attention to the Tātou Collective, which is a new independent Pacific commissioning agency. Now its aim is to change how services are designed and delivered for families across Aotearoa, moving funding decisions closer to communities and putting whānau at the centre. But ultimately, what does that mean in practice? What are its ambitions and how will it be different from the models we have already had in the past? Joining us now to tell more about this is Foliaki, the board chair from Tātou Collective. Mālua lelei, talofa lava, thank you very much for your time.
Hello, William. Good morning.
Look, I want to start with perhaps, inevitably, the first question, easy question. What exactly is the Tātou Collective?
So, it's exactly as you've introduced it, William. We are a specialised commissioning agency. We've got a contract with the Ministry to provide whānau order services to our community, the Pacific community, throughout Aotearoa.
Right, and just touching on that whānau order funding there, I mean, to the everyday listener that perhaps, isn't aware of what whānau order is, could you give us a bit of insight there?
Yeah, so the bulk of funding provides for what we term navigators. So they are frontline people up and down the country who work with families to address possibly an urgent need, but then also work with the families to put together a plan to achieve that family's aspirations. So, yeah.
Certainly. And so, I mean, as has been highlighted, this is relatively new in terms of why it was all set up. I mean, could you give us the sense of the gap that you're filling, or perhaps what previous iterations or other models, differed to this one?
Yeah, so firstly, the gap it's looking to address is, say, families who for a particular set of circumstances may find themselves in need of assistance, that they have got some barriers in accessing, let's say, mainstream services. So we're in there to provide that gap, where a family has found itself in the different circumstances and isn't, for whatever reason, able and have got barriers to access mainstream services. So we can come in there and help and provide that particular service. The other sort of focus and change that, say, from previous iterations of whānau ora is increasing the focus on the highest needs families. So there's been a lot of work looking at where the biggest deprivations are throughout the country, and then trying to set clearer criteria for the families that are particularly in need. So that's one of the major changes. The other changes is trying to accumulate and collect the data of the families that we're working with, so that data can inform future funding decisions and possibly provide more funding to those particular families.
I see. And so, in terms of accountability, I mean, who is the Tātou Collective accountable to at the end of the day?
Well, we've got a contract with the Ministry, so that's who we're accountable for our funding.
Sure.
But our ambitions is that we are accountable to our community that we serve, and that we are serving those people and helping our community. Ultimately is what we're trying to do, achieve their aspirations.
Yes, certainly. No, that all sounds good. I mean, in terms of, as been highlighted, handed whānau order funding, how much are we talking?
The direct funding we're getting to provide 128 navigators up and down the country is $16 million. And then there's further funding available, which we are currently still working with Ministry on how best to spend that money, the rest of the funding pool, which is supporting those particular families. So we've got to work with the families help identify their own plans, build a model that provides funding to help those families achieve those aspirations.
Sure.
So that's sort of the level of funding that we're talking about.
Yeah, and you've touched on it there, but perhaps if we dig a wee bit deeper, I mean, how will you use that money, say, differently from how it's been spent before?
So it is this particular contract. I don't know exactly the terms of the previous contract, but sure, I can speak to our contract. It's very clear on, one, the money going to the frontline services. Two, the second level of funding that is able to support those particular families. The third component is, as I said, collecting the data. And then the last component is actually upskilling our workforce that delivers that funding. So, this contract that we're working on is very clear and quite specific.
Awesome.
And then that allows for what you asked for earlier, for better accountability and assessments of the decisions that we're making.
I mean, and look, how do you determine, or I suppose make sure it ultimately reaches families with the greatest need? I know that is a loaded question, but keen to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, again, we are working with the ministry at the moment to be clear on the criteria for which families are accountable, are able to access this level of support. So that over time will become more clear with both the providers and the community as well. But the first step is for us to be clear with the ministry on how do we assess the eligibility, if you like. And the eligibility is trying to drive us to families with the most need.
Yeah, certainly. And look, I just want to perhaps tap in further on delivery and ambition, just for a moment. I mean, as it highlights on the website, it's about shifting resources closer to communities. What does that actually look like in practice?
So I'll use, as an example, at the moment we've requested expressions of interest to the community for community members who want to participate and be a community voice into where our future investment goes into. So we've received quite a lot of really high quality applications from community members up and down the country. So they will help bring the community's voice into where we should put future funding and supporting the communities achieve their ambitions and families get. So that's just one example of how we're trying to do it slightly differently and put more voice back into the community. And as I said, right back, and when we engage with families, it's the families that sit down with the navigator and design their own plans on how they will work towards achieving their aspirations.
What would you say to the idea that perhaps this is just another layer of bureaucracy? I mean, you've highlighted to me, it sounds like music to my ears, but what would you say to critics?
Well, as I think generally we would say that our communities have significant needs, and we are trying to drive an improvement in all of the various statistics that our communities are on the wrong side of. So I think to say that the status quo is not particularly working well, and we're trying to put in place a system which is open, transparent, and ultimately will also be data-based and research-based. So the evidence should prove, our hope is that evidence will prove that this either works or that we need to make some changes to make it work better.
Yeah, certainly. Look, I mean, it's no secret as well in terms of, as Pacific people, sadly, we're still overrepresented on all the negative socio-economic indicators. I mean, how do we know whether this funding and what Tātou will be doing will actually help change that dial?
Yeah, one of the key elements that we're doing is actually building a database and the information to present back the impact of our work, right? And one of the key elements of building a family plan is actually a progression sort of framework, so they can see the families that we are working with, and we can see whether they're making progression along their own plans. So again, this is driven by the families, and we're supporting the families achieve their own aspirations, but we measure that and we will collect data to demonstrate that back. Now, obviously, it takes some time to put that to fruition, but that is the hope and the ambition.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, efficiency's a big topic at the moment with this government. I mean, just this morning the news came out that the Public Service Commissioner is looking at, for example, the Ministry for Pacific Peoples and whether it needs to be folded into a larger department for, say, the sake of efficiency. I mean, do you look at efficiency through the Tātou Collective as well, or is that perhaps not paramount?
The driver is two things. One is making sure, as you said, that the money goes to the front line. So we're very clear where the money goes. It's predominantly to the front line, which is the navigators to sit down with the families and work with the families. It goes towards helping the families. It goes towards building the professional development and capability of the front line, and it goes towards building the database that we need to demonstrate the evidence of our work, right?
Yeah.
That's 90%, over 90% of the funding. And then you've got to build a machine that able to deliver that and deliver that with scale and with efficiency. So, again, I think that the information will speak to itself and prove that we are efficient. The bigger question is what you asked earlier is it having an impact on our families? Mm-hmm. And that's going to take some time to demonstrate, but we're hopeful that's what we'll achieve.
Yeah, of course. Prior, of course, to the Tātou Collective coming to be, I just want to turn attention perhaps to Pacifica Futures, for example. They had a database and 10 years worth of data. So from Pacifica Futures to the Tātou Collective now, how will yours be more effective?
I can't speak too much to the Pacifica Futures, but what we have done as part of our process is we've mandated that all of our providers are on the one data network. So actually, I'm at the Tātou Collective this morning. We've got 60 navigators, I think, in here this afternoon, getting their training on our database and information flow. So that we are in the process of collecting all of our data into the one place. We're also working with Ministry to anonymise the data so that we can be analysed and provided to other government agencies as well. So there's quite a lot of work. As I said, that's one of the major streams of what we're doing and possibly doing differently.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, look, before we wrap it up, I mean, let's go with the big picture here. I mean, where do you want the collective to be in, say, 5 years?
Well, I think in 5 years' time, I'd hope that, firstly, that we've proven the model that families are setting their own plans and they're setting their own aspirations, and we have been successful in moving them through their plan to achieve their own aspirations. Yeah. That's one. Secondly, that the data will show emphasis of where the system is working and where it's not, and what changes we need to make to improve, again, using some buzzwords, improving the return on investment that we're making in these areas. Sure. And third, lastly, that the community is demonstrating that their voice is coming through and we are self-determining the future for ourselves.
Yeah, certainly. Look, I mean, it's all very exciting and it sounds promising as well. Thank you very much for your time this morning. I genuinely appreciate it. That is Leo Foliaki of the board chair for the Tātou Collective. You're listening to Pacific Mornings on 531 PI. Thank you very much for your time again. You have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you, William. Yeah.